All right, welcome everyone to the Paketo weekly working group meeting. Thank you for joining. I'm really glad to be here and feel free to add yourself to attend this list if you don't have handy the meeting notes link. I will put it here in the chat for folks joining live. And feel free to add yourself there to the attendees list. Before asking for a note taker, I would like to briefly introduce myself because this is the first time I'm facilitating this meeting, and probably for some of you, I'm not sure, for some of you, it's the first time you actually see me here. So I'm the new community manager for Paketo Buildpacks, and that's huge. I mean, I'm scared and excited at the same time because I'm just scratching the surface on how important, how big is the Paketo Buildpacks project. And yeah, well, I'm part of a small team at VMware called Community Engagement. We support several open source projects in terms of community engagement. What is community engagement? Or what is the role, very briefly, the role of a community manager on an open source project? It's basically establishing processes and opening and maintaining communication paths to make sure that users, contributors, and maintainers can actually communicate successfully between them and contribute to a common cause, which is the project. It has, we wear many hats. It has, to do with public speaking, content creation, but also improving processes, lowering barriers for user adoption, because everything starts with adoption. First thing is to successfully gain developers' attention and get them to actually use the Paketo Buildpacks project and have success with it. And then potentially they will have some ways, they will find some ways to contribute back to the project and make it grow. So that's kind of the goal of what we try to do here. Do everything on our on our capacity to support all the efforts to improve the project and to open and establish communication paths in the community. So that's kind of the role here. Besides Paketo Buildpacks, I also support the cartographer project. And there are some synergies, possible synergies there. So I hope to learn from both projects and apply. All right, let me share my screen real quick. All right. First thing, note taker. Can we have a note taker, please?
I can do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, any new faces? Well, for me, most of you are new faces, but I'm not sure if there are net new faces. Maybe not, right? All right, well, I don't think so. Cool, okay, review outstanding RFCs. There you go. How do you usually do it? It's in order or how do you do it?
I think we usually start from the bottom and go over
right.
the oldest items and then go up.
Cool. So first one will be a stack bomb RFC.
I think this one is still blocked for now on the upstream RFC, so I don't think that there's anything to discuss here unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, you can see the blocked label. We can maybe even make that link exclude blocked ones in the future if we wanted to.
Cool. So nothing to discuss here.
Got it. Yeah. All right, next one, source removal build pack.
I don't have anything to add to this. I haven't had time to really interact with this at all as of recent. Emily, I think that you said you wanted to lay out what the behavior the keep default behavior was on this issue. I don't know. I haven't had a lot of time to work on this as a reason.
I mostly just want to make it opt-in instead of opt-out.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, that one.
That's about it. I think that would actually also be in keeping with, I was realizing that there's prior art in the Google Buildpacks as well. They have source removal, I think is opt-in.
Is that opt-in? I'd have to go double check. I because this build pack is loosely based on that concept that they have. It's a little bit more intertwined because of how they build their artifacts, but
We can double check. I just glanced at it the other day and thought that's what I saw, but
yeah, I'll if you wouldn't mind making a post with that would be much appreciated. It's not too rigorous change for me to make, so happy to do it.
Right. Cool. Next one, secure runtime environments.
I think this is still waiting on Sam's reply to some of the feedback. Is that correct? To the best of everyone's understanding. Yeah. So we need the author to come back and address some comments.
Right. All right. Next one, adds RFC for zero config web server builds.
I finally got around to writing up what I talked about last week. So the RFC has been updated with some outlines of how we would achieve particular configurations. Those being like specifying what directory you're actually going to share, and then push state, basic authentication, and whether or not to enforce HTTPS. So those are kind of outlined there. I was waiting for more feedback given that new set of configuration options.
Are you hoping for more feedback from the steering committee or the web server subteam or anybody?
From anyone who had concerns about what was there originally.
Anything else regarding this RFC? No. Okay, next up, propose an image retention policy.
Yeah, I can talk about that. I did push a couple changes this week. Increase the proposed retention time to 2 years. Just thinking that that was being a bit aggressive, and it just refined some of the messaging a little bit to reflect that we're not trying to like minimize anything here, come up with the most cost-effective solution or anything like that, but we're just trying to kind of cap what could otherwise be a unbounded growth in images. So hopefully the changes reflect that. I am just seeing the latest comment now, so I'll take a look at that later. Any other feedback on this one?
Spend some time thinking about this, and I love two minds because I understand your point, but I feel like for us, these images are similar to, these are our release artifacts. And I not worked in a project where in other situations we would have a retention policy for release artifacts, like the main release artifacts. If there's peripheral artifacts, which is usually the place that images fall into, it's like, I'm releasing MySQL database, and I also happen to distribute a convenience MySQL image. I can see those having a retention policy, but in the absence of other release artifacts, I left some comments. I feel a bit uncomfortable with it, but I'm also not sure why I feel so uncomfortable with it. Like, I see your point that, you know, software doesn't last forever, and things do have a shelf life, and setting clear expectations early helps people, you know, plan for that. But I wonder if maybe the compromise here is just having a very long retention policy. I don't know how other people feel.
I'm certainly open to tweaking that number. I changed it to based on our conversations, and if 3 sounds better to people, that's fine. I also was thinking about doing some investigation to see what the different years would mean to us in terms of like how far back we'd go in, like, you know, versions of Java or versions of, you know, the runtimes that we ship, you know, to see, like, you know, if we go back 2 years, are those images all, you know, versions of upstream projects that are cut off and not supported anymore? You know, things like that might help us shape decisions too. So I'm planning to do some investigation there.
Yeah, and I feel like support is different than available. I feel like more prior art would help me feel more comfortable with it. You know, you could be like, oh, Go pulls images after such and such a time, or, you know, this popular project takes jars off Maven Central after so many years, something like that. I think having, I don't want us to be going out on a limb and inventing new expectations here, just because I'm not sure people pay enough attention to some of the details of the project that even if we publicize it, you know, by the time it becomes relevant to people, they might have forgotten.
Yeah, I do think my goal would be to pick some sort of policy that is something that like 99.9% of people don't have to think about. You know, it's like that. It's probably a bad example because I don't think anyone likes it, but it's kind of like, you know, like internet caps. You know, if they pick a good cap that's high enough that, you know, it doesn't impact the majority of people, then does it really matter? Is it still unlimited? You know, I think it'd be kind of similar here in that, like, if we pick a retention period that's long enough, most people just won't care. So I think, like, to me, the biggest question is like, what is that period of time? You know, because if no one ever needs those, then the question will never come up when someone tries to access one that it's not there.
Yeah. It ties into like reproducibility too, right? People might not need them for new builds at a certain point, but if like an app that you built a long time ago exhibits some good behavior and you want to figure out how it got in that state, having the old artifacts helps with reproduction, but I'm stretching for some of the use cases here, right? Like at a certain point, people really shouldn't need them anymore.
All right. Thank you. Anything else regarding this RFC? No. Okay. Next up, Apache Tomcat launch config.
So I can talk on this one briefly. I think there's been quite a few comments and updates. I've incorporated most of the feedback as far as I am aware into the RFC. And there's a PR open on the Tomcat repo. There's a kind of implementation of this. If that to make it a bit more obvious of what it's doing, if there's any confusion.
Did you want to take a look at this one, Emily? I think David and I have both given it a thumbs up. So
Yeah, I could do that. Sorry, this is waiting on me.
Great. Yes, next one, that's RFC on build reproducibility.
Not much to say here. There's conversation ongoing.
Okay.
There's some discussion about whether or not we would provide functionality to say toggle the built at field. Sorry, some glass just broke here. For me, I could go one way or the other. I don't feel strongly about it. I think that we have good enough coverage with what we have, just doing the SHA assertion and then like specifying that the log line is there. I think we are kind of being like maybe a little bit overly paranoid with the implementation where we actually look for built at. So I'm fine with just removing it entirely and not really having any sort of replacement for it or a toggle for it. But also I could see why we may want to keep that. So
I'm also fine with just totally removing it. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear from the comments. I was more objecting to some of the wording in the RFC that made it seem like you could use the SHA to do the same type of assertion. Just wanted to call out that we would not have that ability anymore. But that being said, I'm okay with that. I think it's fine.
I thought there was maybe an interesting side conversation to have here based on Emily's comment about like what is and isn't a public API, and that maybe we need to spell that out a little bit better, both for our own like internal consistency, but also so it's clear to users like what we consider public and not public. Because I had kind of assumed would be public, and then but I think there's points to, points for both directions, so I could see where someone might be confused. Does that seem like a discussion thread we should start somewhere, or is that an RFC we should propose? Or I don't know, thoughts on how we might have that type of discussion?
Yeah, in a way, there's not much to do about it, I guess, other than amending our SEMVer RFC if we take it to clarify whether it's part of the public API or not, and some documentation.
It might be interesting to try to like document the areas we have structured information. Like I know you have the Buildpacks spec, but where we're, I guess on the Paketo side, where we're putting potentially useful things, we could try to like maybe list those in the docs and then, provide a statement or something, like source bomb information, I'm pretty sure we consider that to be a public API. And so, what do we change or not change would be helpful.
Yeah, is anyone making the case that this particular type of layer metadata should be a public API? It seems like there's other ways for us to expose metadata as part of a public API if we want to commit to it, and then calling this a public API is just making our lives harder.
I don't know of anyone that's like out and out saying like, yes, I want this as a public API, please give this to me. But I do know of implementations of integrations with Buildpacks that would be broken by us like modifying or removing some of these fields. There are instances where like things look inside, like relatively deeply inside, like what appear in certain places inside the layer metadata in order to like introspect on the image. I think in those cases, like I'd much rather see that use case called out and for us to provide like a better top level API for it, whether that's like a different label that's like a feature flag to indicate that something is enabled, instead of having things that want to know about what's going on with a particular image, like going spelunking through some of the metadata information.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because we can add arbitrary labels, it seems like that'd be a great way to surface intentionally public APIs. Because we also put things in the layer metadata that's clearly just for making reuse decisions and not for humans to look at, right? So serving both purposes seems bad, but it seems like there might be cases where we need to reach out to our existing users and help people stop depending on it so that we can truly move to make this an internal API.
Right, thank you. Anything else? If not, updates Java README.
I think this is just a follow-up to set an RFC number for something that got merged. I just need somebody to
I can do that right
merge that for me.
Next up, well, this one.
This is another, this is an addendum to a Java subteam RFC 0004. We had a step in that RFC that was part of the implementation that we've, upon further investigation, decided to not implement. It just didn't really make sense because the amount of work that we needed to be done versus like the benefit was not there. So we just kind of struck that, or we're just proposing to strike that from the RFC just to clarify that we didn't do that particular step. And then we're going to essentially mark this RFC complete. Unless anyone has any objections.
Like, no objections. All right. Sorry. Next one, disabling SBOM.
The gist of this one is that it wasn't more than about 24 hours after we released SBOM support in Node before we had already received complaints from some users of that build pack that it was very slow to generate an SBOM for Node modules. In some cases, we're seeing like it takes as long to generate the SBOM as it does to install Node modules to begin with. And so people are seeing things like doubling of time for their build to complete. And there are a lot of folks who just aren't either ready yet or aren't interested at all in the SBOM functionality in Buildpacks. And so having a toggle switch to be able to turn it off and say, please save me the build time of not generating an SBOM, I think would be useful to that subset of folks that don't really want that particular feature. I wanted to bring it up here because we already at this point have a number of kind of like polyglot build families where we're doing stuff like including Node in Java and including Node in web servers and including Node in Ruby. And so I wanted to make sure that we had kind of a global flag for specifying that this feature should be disabled such that we don't have to have users specify 5 different language specific SBOM flags in order to turn off all the SBOM generation.
%. Seems like the right thing to do.
Would this be for the old label-based SBOM or the new layer-based SBOM or both?
I would assume it should apply to everything.
Okay.
I can say that explicitly in there. I can add that.
The reason I bring that up is because we did add support to disable, in particular, the label-based part because of the problem that generates with Kubernetes if you have labels that are too large. And that's something that we've released, not for a terribly long period of time now, but it's been out for a couple of weeks.
I think it's reasonable to just continue to have that label, but have this one like supersede its setting. So like, if you specify that one in a behavior you have currently implemented, it seems reasonable to keep. But that if this one is set, then it's as if that flag is getting set to true as well.
Yeah. Would there be interest in having two separate flags in this RFC to, I guess, make that distinction or make that clarification?
I guess the question I would ask is just why do we feel like we need that?
Well, like on the Java side, SBOM's very low impact. And a flag that would disable both is probably not what most people want. They probably want to disable the label stuff primarily because it takes longer to generate, and it creates these giant labels that can break their deployment. So there's a definite reason I can see Java people wanting that, less so on generating the other source bomb, or not generating the newer source bomb.
I guess like the question becomes, is there a scenario where people want the old SBOM format and don't want the new SBOM format?
That I would doubt. Yeah, I don't think that. I think the scenario would be only the new format, both or none. Those would be the three that would come to mind.
Yeah, so then in that case, I think we get it if you have this flag apply to all SBOM, old and new, and your other existing flag with its current behavior just applying to old SBOM format. You get all three of those cases are covered by that. In addition, that means also all the other build packs don't have to implement this extra label SBOM disable thing, which is like not a contract we've had to.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I was thinking on just from a consistency standpoint, but I guess a lot of the other build packs didn't have the label based stuff, so it may not make sense there. Yeah, that's fine.
Any other comment around RFC? Right, thank you, Ryan. And finally, this one.
This is just I don't know why Forrest's name is on that. I will fix that. But anyways, this is just a really small edit to an addendum RFC to the PHP rewrite work. I added an addendum like last week that's already been approved. And I was actually like working on the implementation and noticed a couple issues. So I just put in some changes to specify like what the implementation should actually look like and what the API should look like. So I just need the PHP maintainers to take a look and just sign off on that. Probably should have done a little bit more investigation before putting in the addendum PR the first time around. But that's it.
Got it. Well, that will be it. So please remind to capture all your observations, ideas, objections, etc., as comments in the thread for each RFC, so people out there can have visibility. And also, I had a really little small suggestion that the cartographer team is using right now to handle the RFC process is to actually use a project board, which each column is one of the stages in the RFC process. So they are using this. Well, I'm helping there. Use this to actually discuss RFCs in some specific stages that require synchronous discussion, and to provide visibility to folks out there on the actual status of a proposal. So if you want to consider that idea, I can pair with anyone from you to implement or discuss further. All right. Next up, libcmb updates and questions. Is there any update question regarding libcmb v2?
Can I put Dan on the spot for that one? I feel like you're the one who's following this most closely, even if there's not a big update from last time.
Yeah, so the V2 stuff, I don't know that there was a huge update from the last meeting. I had submitted some patches for V2 that brought it up to speed with the main branch. So we had been missing a couple changes for SBOM that had gone into main, but had not gotten moved over. So those are moved over now. And then I did some deprecation work. So there was some legacy stuff marked to be deprecated in the main branch around bindings. And I pulled that stuff out. And I think there were a couple other small changes, and we bumped the pipelines. So it was just kind of getting it back to parity with main for the most part, and some cleanup. I think the two things left that I'd like to explore a little more, one would be the binding interface. I know Sam has made some comments in the past about not being hugely happy with the way that we have the API structured to load the bindings. There's a difference in behavior between loading them at build time and loading them at detect time, which seems a little odd. So I don't necessarily know we have to change it, but I'd be curious to see if there's any feedback on that and how we might be able to improve that we could provide based on our experience, like with Packet and stuff. And then the other is logging. I still think we need to do something around logging, but I haven't had a chance to play around and try to propose something yet.
The last bike sheddy thing, since we're taking the opportunity to go to V2, I don't know to what extent you guys have looked into this, but I'd be curious about package naming. I feel like some of the cutesy names in libcmb are not the most idiomatic. You mentioned logging made me think of this. I think it was called Poet or something instead of like logs.
We changed that.
Okay, great.
We did change it just to log.
I think it might be worth doing, just an audit of all the package names, because this would be our chance to make a breaking change.
Yeah, I'd be curious too, just in general, how people feel about the package structure and what's in kind of the main package versus like some of the sub packages that are there, and if that holds up, just on how people want to use it, just so that you don't have to import things that you don't need. So if we have the right kind of fine grain, that's what I'm looking for. I don't know. I guess the right level of detail there, so that it's flexible and you can pull in what you need without having to pull in too much.
I'll also call out that the Buildpack authors tooling meeting is this week as well. It's Friday in the morning, 10 a.m. Eastern, I think. So any interested parties?
Thank you. Okay, and finally, project update. Git Buildpack has been migrated. I don't think
yep.
that's
Sorry.
just from the last week. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, the Get Build Pack has been added to the Go Build Pack family. I don't know if I can accidentally put the same build pack twice. But this was all in an attempt to support the usage of private modules when using the Go Build Pack. And through some preliminary testing, it looks like it works pretty well. So if that is something that you have been blocked on or something you're looking to do, then it is supported and will be released shortly. I assume as well that we will be looking into adding it to other language families to support package managers that also use Git authentication as a means of sort of having private modules. I believe NPM and Yarn both support that, and that's just kind of off my head, top of my head. So.
I just added this at the end of the agenda, but this project update section always makes me wonder if we should have a newsletter, just because, well, we do get some attendance at this meeting. It'd be nice to be able to blast these updates to a wider group of people. Like, yeah, you can do Go support for private modules and Go now, stuff like that.
Speaking
Yeah,
as someone who consistently forgets to tweet from the Paketo account, I love the idea of a newsletter, and I don't know who would have capacity to write said newsletter.
Maybe this is something we could rope David into now that he's here, but we can talk about
Yeah.
it offline. I don't want to load you up with too
Yeah,
many things.
I think both things, I mean, both Twitter or social media and newsletter are needed. Yeah, I just started a newsletter with the Cartographer project every 2 weeks. And I found some ways to build it on my own without asking for time from the maintainers team. But at least for the first versions of a newsletter here, I will need your help to actually build it. But I will gather all the content and make sure it's received by the users in the community. But I'm not sure if we already have a mailing list or a Google group or something. That's a separate conversation. I will have a call with Forrest. And as I mentioned, I have dozens of questions like this. But yeah, definitely a newsletter is a really good way to capture updates, bust them out, and make it actionable. It's really useful. Mhm.
I had another agenda item, I think, just to talk about before we leave. So I've seen a lot of requests in Paketo Slack and now in some issues for Ubuntu 20.04 support focal. I think in most cases we've like let folks know that our policy is to like support a new version every 4 years just because of like the overhead associated with supporting like multiple stacks and also like switching over. But I had seen in some discussions some like preliminary interest slash just like talking about like maybe having like a community supported Ubuntu 20.04 stack. Really don't know like what this will mean in practice or if it will actually even happen, but given just like the amount of interest that we've seen and the fact that I'm a stacks maintainer, just wanted to like put this on people's radar and like if anyone's like specifically interested or has opinions about this, like I'd love to chat. I don't know exactly like what community supported system would even look like, especially for something as big as an entirely like new version of Ubuntu, because it's like very far reaching. But I definitely don't want to be like working on this just in the stacks area in isolation, because I think it will reach across the entire project and also have an impact on like our resources and things like that. So as of now, I don't really have anything to propose, but I just wanted to like bring this up, make people aware of it, and like ping me if you have any questions or want to discuss.
Seems like at the very least, it could be worth getting some feedback on our existing policy of doing every other LTS version for Ubuntu. I'd love to get some sense of, you know, how many folks really do want focal, and then if it's enough, I think it could be worth doing it as a fully supported stack, just because even if it's I don't see a huge difference in how we do it one way or the other, whether we call it community supported or supported. We'd want all the Buildpacks to work on it, so it's kind of the same thing either way.
What like method or avenue would you propose to collect feedback about this?
Well, if we had a mailing list, I'm just kidding. We could like put a poll in Slack or something. It might be a way, or just try to. I think Slack is probably our best method of communication at the moment.
Cool. Yeah, I can put that together.
Sorry, what has been your experience with GitHub discussions? I mean, is it a good way to receive feedback?
Yeah, we definitely use them a good amount. I saw the roadmap is up and has a lot of feedback. So maybe I'll start something there and link out to it in Slack so we can have it in a nice discoverable location.
Yeah, I feel like the one thing I worry about with a survey like that is the primary respondents are going to be the complainants. And
Yeah.
you're not going to hear from the happy people that are probably the 90%. So I don't know. I definitely would like to know more why people would want that. Is it just I like to be on the latest, or is there some specific reason? And like, especially if it's impacting their ability to use Buildpacks, like policy reasons for their company or something, that would be, I think, important to know that stuff.
Yeah, just for context, the most recent request I saw for this was from somebody whose company wouldn't, like their policy wouldn't let them use Ubuntu 18.04 because there's a CVE inside of it that like is only fixed in Focal. It's not available in 18.04, and it's not something that we could like patch because it's like Ubuntu like themselves isn't fixing it. So they just, as long as we only support 18.04, they won't really be able to use it, or they have to make their own stacks.
Do we have any capacity to request Canonical fix that? Do we have a relationship with Canonical for support?
As a project, no. Many of us here work for companies that may have a process for requesting a fix, though.
It also, my understanding from some of the like will not fixes from a Canonical also come down to their API promise as well. So like if there is a CVE that breaks API compatibility, they'll completely write off won't fix, and it's in like like they have like SLAs where they can't fix it. So
that makes sense. Like if they broke API compatibility, they'd break our rebase feature, which we say always works. So we should be careful what we wish for in some areas. It feels to me like a good idea, not just for Focal, but in general, if we're thinking about stacks, to reach out about base images and get a sense of people's requirements, though.
Yeah, I wonder too if this could be a good thing in the long run too, and that it forces us to get more efficient about generating stacks and doing stack updates and all that. And maybe even think about how we can crowdsource some of that, or get more involvement. you know, I think that's where when I had suggested having it be like a community effort, I think my intent was to try to solicit some people to stand up and say, oh yeah, I would volunteer to help with that, you know, because, you know, if we get more hands, then it makes things easier. So if we can think about ways to make it easier for people to contribute, then that might be a good goal to strive for.
Got it. Anything else regarding this point? Okay, seems like we are at it. That's it for the agenda. So if there's nothing else to share, thank you for your time, and I hope to see you next week.